I want to give you the exact formula that allowed me to grow 8 different Shopify brands to 7 figures within the first 12 months of owning them. This is not some gimmick or hack that works as a one-off thing. It has literally worked for the past 5 years, 8 different times in a row. I call it the 7-figure Shopify sales formula. Pretty clever name, I know. But in this video, we're going to be explaining it in a way that is going to be applicable to everyone. It doesn't matter if you haven't started spending yet. This is going to give you a better understanding of what metrics to look for once you do. Or maybe you spent your first $100, then this is going to help you analyze your ads and identify the winners that you want to start scaling up. And if you're in the category of people that have spent your first $1,000 on ads, then this is going to help you fine tune your funnel and find profitability. And if you spent over $5,000, then this is easily going to add an extra 10 to 20% to your net profit. And if you're somebody who's spent over $10,000 on marketing to your Shopify store, then this is quite honestly going to be one of the most valuable videos I can possibly make, because this is going to open up the floodgates for you and your business. And to demonstrate this, we're going to be using example metrics from a student from inside WeScale University who recently posted this screenshot about his past 30 days in his business. And if you haven't heard me talk about WeScale University before, it's our paid community where we do lots of group coaching calls, one-on-one feedback and support, and a whole bunch of other stuff to help you build, grow, and scale your Shopify print-on-demand brand. And the metrics that this particular student had in the past 30 days was they did $30,000 in sales, spent $12,000 on ads, they had an overall ROAS of 2.34, and they had an average order value of $46. More importantly, their conversion rate was 1.55%. We're going to be talking a lot about that, so be sure to stick around for that. And we're going to be covering very tangible takeaways and ways that you can improve that. And overall, their conversion rate was 1.88. They had a cost per link click of 42 cents, which is pretty solid. That's even under the range that we typically aim for, which is 50 to 75 cents. And overall, their net margin was 7.34%, which left them with $2,100 in profit, which is right around the range that I would expect given a 2.34 overall ROAS. For frame of reference, when we're at a 2.5, that's typically a 10% margin, a 3 is a 20% margin, and 4 is around 25 to 30%. And the cool thing about what we're about to go through is you're going to be learning how we can get a pretty complete view of the business and diagnose things just based off of these metrics alone without ever even seeing the store, knowing what the ads look like, what the offer is. We can pretty much paint a picture and diagnose where we should be spending our time just off of these metrics using the framework they're about to walk through. Now, before we dive in, let's go through a couple of definitions just so we're all on the same page here. This is not the kind of training where we're going to be glossing over stuff. So first up, we have our ROAS, which is return on ad spend. Basically, when I spend $1, how many dollars am I getting back? If I'm getting $2 back for that, that would be a ROAS of 2. Next is our earnings per session, otherwise known as EPS. And this is if I send 100 sessions to the site and I make $100 in sales, that would be a $1 earnings per session. Next, we have the inverse of that, which is our cost per session, or CPS. And cost per session is if I send 100 units of traffic to the site, how much should I pay per unit of traffic? So if I spent $50 on ads and I got 100 sessions out of that, that would be a cost per session of 50 cents. Then we have our AOV, which is our average order value. So if we have 10 orders and we made $1,000 in sales, then that would be an average order value of $100. Then our drop-off percentage is the percentage of people that when we send them to the site, they just simply don't wait long enough for the site to load. So this is heavily impacted by the site speed primarily, but to give us a simple example, if we send 100 clicks to the site and we get 80 sessions out of that, then that would be a drop-off of 20%. And typical range for this is around 10 to 20% in general. If it gets much higher than that, then that means that there's normally a site load speed issue. Then we have our CPMs, which stands for cost per mille, or more importantly, cost per 1,000 impressions. And last but not least, we have our CTR, which is our link click-through rate. So if our ad is shown 100 times and 5 people click on it, then that would be a click-through rate of 5%. Typical range for this is around 2 to 3, but it varies like a lot depending on the niche, the product, the competition in your space, a lot of different variables. But for print-on-demand Shopify stores, 1 to 3%, normally 2 to 3 is pretty typical. Mainly where we care about aiming for the cost per link click that we want, which actually is not on here. I just noticed. So CPC equals cost per link click. An important thing to note is that Facebook has a CPC, just cost per click all. What we want to be looking at is cost per link click. So it'll look like this, because cost per click all is if somebody sees your ad and they click anywhere on the ad, like if they click on your Facebook profile, for example, that gets counted as a click. But we want to specifically be tracking the cost per link click, which is the number of people that click on either our call to action or the URL in our ad copy. All right, now that we got our definitions out of the way, this is where it gets good. And we're going to be going through what's called the ROAS formula. And ROAS, like we just defined earlier, is called return on ad spend, which you might think, you gave a simple example. You spend $1, get $2 back. Isn't that pretty much it? And you're right, it is pretty much it. But what we're about to be doing is basically diving into the why behind what are all the different variables, what are all the moving pieces that impact that ROAS. And you can think of this as in like math class when you learn, or your teacher would teach you how to solve the problem the really long way. So you would understand it at a conceptual level, and then they teach you like the shortcut way. And it was always really annoying, obviously. But the main difference here is instead of getting a better grade on a math test as our reward, here we're going to be making a lot more money. So, to me, it's worth it. But anyway, so the ROAS formula is quite simply our earnings per session divided by our cost per session. So to use easy numbers, if we're making $2 per session and we paid $1 per session, that would be a ROAS of 2. And the formula for our earnings per session is conversion rate times average order value. The formula for cost per session is cost per link click divided by 1 minus the drop-off percentage. Because you would think, like, if we're paying 50 cents per link click, that would just be our cost per session, right? Which close, but we have to factor for the number of people that are going to drop off because they're just not waiting long enough for the site to load. So the way that we factor for that is by dividing it by 1 minus the drop-off percentage. Then our cost per link click, which is normally in the 50 to 75 cent range, the formula for that is the CPM, cost per 1,000 impressions, divided by the CTR times 1,000. And the reason for that, if you think about it, is it's how much we're paying per 1,000 impressions divided by how many people are clicking on the ad times 1,000 to make it be comparing apples to apples. That gives us our cost per link click. So to use an easy example, if we have a CPM of $10, paying $10 for 1,000 impressions, and we have a click-through rate of 1%, that would be a cost per click of $1. But then if we double our click-through rate, say we have CPMs of $10 again, and we have a 2% link click-through rate, that would be a cost per link click of 50 cents. And I know this seems like a lot of like breakdown and stuff, but trust me, it's all going to be applicable in like really understanding this formula from top to bottom. And it's zero exaggeration when I say this is the most valuable thing that I've learned in the past 7-8 years of running e-commerce businesses. And in the example from the student that we're going to be working through, they had a CPM of $9.11, a link click-through rate of 2.16, and a conversion rate of 1.88. And their average order value was $46.41. So using these numbers as an example, if we have a link click-through rate of 2.16, 0.226 times 1,000 equals 21.6. Then if we take the CPM of 9.11 divided by 21.6, that gives us 42 cents for the cost per link click, which if we're doing our math right, should be exactly what they had in their ad account. We scroll up to look at their ad account and see their cost per link click was 42 cents. So you can see now that the CPM and the link click through rate, it's literally the formula that spits out the cost per click. If you don't think that's cool, then just hang tight, because now we're going to be going through the full ROAS formula. We talked about earlier how the ROAS is equal to the earnings per session divided by the cost per session. Or if you drop the per session, it's just earnings divided by cost, which makes sense. Now, using the formulas that we laid out up here, we're going to be turning the simplified ROAS formula into its full version. So first up, we have our earnings per session, which is equal to a conversion rate times the average order value. Then we divide by our cost per session, which cost per session is cost per click divided by 1 minus the drop off. And lastly, we have to sub in our cost per link click equation, which is CPM over CTR times 1,000. So we copy this, plug it in there, and that's how we get to the long form, full version of everything that gets factored into determining our ROAS. And we add the brackets around that to make it mathematically correct. And then next, we're going to sub in the costs from the example. So remember, we said they had a $9.11 CPM. Their link click-through rate was 2.16%. Multiply that by 1,000, and 1 minus the drop-off. And all of that is underneath the earnings per session. So we can condense this down to 42 cents as the cost per link click. And then in this case, because normally like a 10 to 20% drop-off is typical, but looking at the number of sessions they had, They clearly had sessions from email marketing and other places because they had 29,500 link clicks and they had 31,000 online sessions. So just for this example, we'll say that it's 0 because we don't have perfect data. In a perfect world, we would have like an attribution software like ROAS that could tell us exactly how many sessions came from Facebook and how many sessions came from email separately. But with imperfect data, we can make some assumptions. So we'll just count the drop off as 0. If we really wanted to do it, we would count it as the opposite because they had more sessions than link clicks, but it's not going to throw things off to just count it as 0 for now. So we have earnings per session divided by 42 cents cost per session. Now our earnings per session is 1.88% times 46.41 average order value. When you do that math, it's 0.0188 times 46.41 equals 87 cents. So our ROAS formula is 87 cents divided by 42 cents, which gives us the ROAS. Calculating it manually ourselves, we got to a ROAS of 2.07. The actual ROAS, as reported by Facebook, is 2.13, as you can see right here. So there's the ROAS, which the reason that it's off slightly, it's only off like by a tiny bit, but the reason it's off is that Facebook, again, gives us imperfect data, so our attribution isn't 100%, but it's pretty amazing that just by doing it manually, by pulling the numbers ourselves, we were able to get to roughly the same exact number as Facebook. Which so far, if you're like, that's cool, but like, why does that matter? We're going to get there. Don't worry. Lastly, I want to show you one other way to solve for this, which is by using, instead of the Facebook ROAS, solving for the MER, or marketing efficiency ratio, otherwise known as the overall ROAS. So if you just take our total sales divided by total ad spend, that gives you your MER. So if we have 10 grand in sales, 2,500 in total ad spend across all channels, your blended ROAS, that would be a 4. And the way that we calculate this is pretty similar, but it's earnings per session divided by ad spend divided by sessions equals 87 cents over 12,415 divided by 31,116 gives you 87 cents divided by 39 cents, which is 2.23. And if you remember back at the beginning, the student from WeScale said they had a 2.34 MER. And the reason for that is that in our formula, we are looking at the conversion rate times the average order value. And the reason that it's slightly off from what we're showing here is that we're calculating the earnings per session by taking the conversion rate times the average order value, which makes sense. But you would still think like that would be the same number, right? The reason it's slightly off is that the average order value here, or it doesn't account for shipping cost. Better said, it doesn't account for shipping revenue. So this number here, total sales, 29,495, that does account for shipping revenue, and this one does not. So that's why his MER is slightly higher. If you were to take number of orders times 46.41, let's do that. 585 times 46.41, it's going to be 27 something. Yeah, 27,149. So that gives us about 2.3K unaccounted for, which is just, again, why the MER that he reported was slightly off from what we're looking at here. Now let's get into some examples of how this is useful and how we can apply it. In an example scenario, if we had a conversion rate of 3% and an average order value of 40 and a cost per session of $1, that would give us a ROAS of 1.2. Which makes sense. Just using the formulas, a simplified version of the formulas that we just walked through. Then if we were to increase our conversion rate to 4, that's a 33% increase. That would bring our ROAS from a 1.2 up to a 1.6. Or a different change we could have is if we lowered our cost per session from $1 to 50 cents. That would take our ROAS from a 1.2 to a 2.4. And then if we're able to cut it in half again, that would double our ROAS again. Cutting it from 50 cents down to 25 cents cost per session would take us from a 2.4 ROAS to a 4.8. Now, using the actual numbers that we were given in the example, they had a 1.88% conversion rate, 46.41 average order value, and a cost per session of 42 cents, which gives us the ROAS of 2.07. And like the examples up here, where we play around with improvements to the conversion rate and see what that does to our overall ROAS, if we're able to bring our overall conversion rate on this store from a 1.88 to a 2.5% conversion rate, not a big jump, that would increase the ROAS from a 2.07 to a 2.76. It's pretty wild. And then just another 0.5% increase to the conversion rate takes us from a 2.76 ROAS to a 3.31. The reason that it's so important to look at the levers that we're able to play with here is because what I used to do is I would look at my ad account and I would look at my store and I would be getting okay sales, and I would spend 90% of my effort just looking at the ad account. I was watching all the latest trainings, I was looking at all the ad metrics, and that was all that I could think about. And so what I ended up doing was spending all of my time trying to make these minor adjustments in the ad account. Like I would try down to the level of, I was trying to get my cost per link click in this example, or cost per session, from 42 cents down to 40. Like you can only get your cost per session down so low. And I was trying to optimize for that last like 5 to 10% change, when if I had zoomed back out and understood the big picture here, I would have seen that there was massive low-hanging fruit right on the other side of this equation. I was just only looking at one variable within it. And the reason that this is so valuable is because it puts everything, all the variables that we have to consider, in one formula. And especially in the beginning when there's, so many numbers being thrown at us to understand and learn, to me, it's super helpful to have just one source of truth that if I increase this metric from 40 to 35 cents, what happens? It's like, okay, I get a small increase. Now, if I improve this metric, like my conversion rate from a 2 to a 3, which is like 50% jump, but we know that that's doable because of the benchmarks we're about to go through. If I can go from 2 to a 3, that increases my ROAS by 50%. So it just completely puts it into context or frame of reference of like where my time should actually be spent. So I stop, trying to use a hammer to screw in a screw is essentially what I was trying to do. And it helps us to zoom out to 10,000 feet and look at the full picture. So next, the benchmarks that we can kind of aim for in this business. And this is for print-on-demand sellers selling $25 to $30-ish price point products. We sell primarily t-shirts. That's what I recommend for a lot of different reasons, but more on that in the school community that you can check out down below. It's completely free, or the 21-hour course. But the benchmarks that we shoot for in our own business is a conversion rate of roughly 2.5% to 3%, average order value of $45, cost per link click of 50 to 75 cents. And all of that to be said, like after seeing these numbers, these benchmarks that we share with everybody inside of WeScale and in the groups that I know from running lots of these stores, that these are benchmarks that are very doable. We can see that it's the conversion rate is the number in this example up here that was way out of whack. And the cost per link click is actually in a pretty solid spot. So we could sit here and talk about like ways to improve the ads and get cheaper cost per sessions. But in reality, the lowest hanging fruit is on the conversion rate side. And so it's like, okay, if we improve the conversion rate, what would happen? Well, if we can get it up to the benchmark level of 2.5%, that would skyrocket our ROAS up to a 2.7. If we can get it up another 0.5%, that takes us up to a 3.31, and then we're like flying. And to put an exact number to flying, to getting us our conversion rate to a 2.5% would add $8,874 to their gross sales. That's their top line. And that would add roughly $4,000 in profit to their bottom line. Now, if they can get it up to a 3%, that would add $16,030 to their top line sales, which would be $8,000 roughly in profit. Now, the bottom line from this is increase the conversion rate. So the first step of this whole thing is understanding the equation. Second is plugging in our metrics to see, okay, what does our equation look like? Where should our time best be spent? Like, is it on the conversion rate? Is it the average order value? Is it the cost per session? Is it the cost per link click? And we iron out all those variables and we can see, like, it becomes glaringly obvious after doing this process where our time should be spent. Then the question becomes, okay, what should we do about it? So to demonstrate what each one of these steps within the conversion rate, which in this example, we're optimizing conversion rate because we identified it's not average order value, it's not cost per link click, it's not cost per session, it's none of those, it's conversion rate in this case. Based comparing it to our benchmarks, we know that that's where our time is best spent. So then the question that we're about to answer is, how do we improve that? Well, the follow-up question when it's conversion rate specifically is which step in your funnel needs to be fixed. So there's the add to cart rate, there's the reach checkout, and then sessions converted. And I'll demonstrate this by using our demo store seasonal collections. So add to cart is the percentage of people that land on your collection page or product page and then click add to cart. So out of 100 sessions on your site, how many times did a unique person click the add to cart button? That's the add to cart percentage. And looking back at our benchmarks, a benchmark add to cart rate is around 6 to 8% typically. Again, it's very specific to the store, the niche, where you're marketing to, but generally that's a good number to shoot for. And a good reach checkout rate is normally in like the 5 to 6% range. And it shouldn't be a massive drop off from the add to cart rate. And that's exactly what we're seeing here. So the add to cart to reach checkout, that's the percentage of people who added to cart and then clicked this button, which ends up with them landing on your checkout page. So what could possibly be causing this big of a drop off? And before we answer that question, let's wrap up. The sessions converted is the percentage of people that land on this page and then enter all their payment information, get through the whole process, and then click pay now. So as a quick aside, this is the easiest step to optimize for because there's very few variables, especially if you're not on Shopify Plus. You don't have a whole lot of control over this page. It's pretty much just limited to the payment methods and like the colors of the page. Yeah, it's a fairly straightforward page. That and the shipping cost is one other one. But in this case, we can safely identify that it is the reach checkout rate that we need to fix. Then we hone in on, okay, what impacts the reach checkout rate? And there's a couple of main things. So first, we have a couple that impact the overall add to cart rate, which we still talk about. Like for example, on this store, they didn't have color isolation on their call to action buttons. So they had a red button, they had a green button, they had a black button. We want to make sure that all of our call to action buttons are the exact same color all the way through the funnel. Next, the title for their collection page was just simply all products, which doesn't seem like a big deal, except for when your traffic is landing on a page on mobile and the first thing that they're seeing across the top third of their page just says all products. It's not the best shopping experience. So we want to change that to something that is themed around the collection that they're clicking onto. Next, they had an issue where when I would click on, see how this is the white shirt here? If I click on it, I should see the white shirt after this. But in this case, it took us to a different color shirt, which seems, again, like a minor detail, but it's all these little minor things that add up to a big deal. And this one, fortunately, is a simple fix, just slightly time consuming. You have to go through every single one of your products in Shopify and make sure that you correctly order the variants to be the first variant should be the main image that you're showing on the collection page. And then you won't have this issue. Next, the background color of their product page was an off gray. They were trying to do something that was on brand and felt good, but it's been well proven at this point that pristine white landing pages, or just pages in general, convert way better than any other color. Next, the color of their review stars was like an off blue. Again, trying to do something that was branded, but not really necessary here. We just want to go with the color that is tested and proven, and it's a color that people trust and have come to associate yellow equals review. Next, it was a minor thing, but their product reviews were directly beneath their information here on the product page, which if somebody is looking for reviews, they're willing to scroll to the bottom of the page for that. And we want to use that opportunity to show them other products before they get to the review section. So we always keep our reviews at the very bottom of the page. Then they also had a scrolling add to cart button, which is a good idea in theory. Basically, as somebody is scrolling on their phone, it pops up a bar at the bottom. But the major issue with this, and this ties directly to the reach checkout rate, was that see how when I click on add to cart, it pops out the cart here, and then it's very clear and obvious that I need to click this button next. While this button, this call to action, was popping out their cart, whichever app they used for the scrolling add to cart button was not doing that functionality. The only change that was happening as a user scrolls down and then they decide that they like the shirt, they click add to cart, and I'm hovering over these images. Just imagine there's an add to cart button there. I click that, and the only thing that was changing, it was not popping out on the side like this. The only thing that was changing, the only way that a customer would know that, hey, it added to cart, it worked, is this number up here was updating. So it would go from a 1 to a 2, which on mobile, especially on a small mobile phone, is a pretty minor change to have to be aware of. And again, the reach checkout rate is the percentage of people that added to cart and then actually reached the checkout page. And if I'm scrolling and I add to cart and then nothing happens, it feels like a broken site and I'm just going to leave. Then they offered different shipping protection plans, which I'm totally fine with, but they were named things that felt like canned answers. It didn't feel like a unique, like, oh, a shipping protection plan just for me. Like, for example, all of our shipping costs, we do $4.87. We don't do $4.99 because that feels like an arbitrarily selected number by some marketing guy somewhere, and that just annoys people. Instead, we do $4.87 because it feels like an auto-generated number that is, so unique that it's probably based off of the shipping weight or the distance to me. It doesn't feel like it's just plucked out of the air. So the numbers on their shipping insurance was rounded like $1.99 type pricing, and it was named like shipping insurance 2, which again, we don't want it to feel like it's just plucked out of the air, chosen by some marketing guy somewhere. We want it to feel like it's an authentic experience. Honestly, for the shipping insurance, I would just remove the names and just make it the random pricing. One of the sneakiest ones was that their mobile pop-up was not optimized for mobile phones. It was showing this Klaviyo desktop version, but it was super crammed in on the phone screen. So not only does that lower the percentage of people that are going to opt in, obviously, but for everybody else who it happens to trigger for, as they're having a somewhat good shopping experience, that's going to be like pretty off-putting and really make people second guess whether they want to trust buying from the store or not. And we saved the absolute best for last, and this ties directly to the reach checkout rate. And that is, they had, with the best of intentions, great thought process and theory behind it, they had in-cart upsells. Not just in-cart though, where like once you get to the cart page, it shows, other products you can add. It was an in-cart, in-between checkout upsell. So meaning when I clicked this button on their site to go to checkout, I wouldn't go to checkout. I would go to an in-between landing page. That's good enough. Like, that's pretty bad. Overall, they're doing an amazing job. Their site looks great. They have great products. They did 30 grand in sales. They're doing a lot of stuff right. I just want to be clear about that. But this was particularly impactful because not only was it interrupting people's ability to just check out directly, like you already got them there. Like they want to give you their money. Just let them do that. But they were landing on this in-between page. And on that page, whoever developed this app, like somebody needs to talk to them, because the page had multiple nearly identical call to action buttons on it. So it had product 1, call to action button, product 2, call to action button, but like add to cart. But they all looked like the same neon green and size and coloring as the actual checkout button at the bottom. So not only did they try to check out and then get smacked with another page, that other page basically camouflaged the actual checkout button and impacted the person's ability to get to the actual checkout page. And then once they get there, they're already tired from getting hit with the exit intent pop-up that's not mobile optimized. They had to zoom in to like look and notice that the number on the cart icon or the bag in the top corner, that increased. Then once they finally notice that, they click the checkout button and they get brought to an upsell page. They have to identify which checkout button they actually click. Now they're finally on the page. Now they have to enter all their information. It's just a very arduous process. And bringing this back full circle to what we were talking about in the beginning is that this, when we describe it like this, it feels like glaringly obvious. It's like, sure, yeah, we should have, just sent them right to the checkout page. But in the grand scheme of things, when like, again, the student is extremely smart, they're very gifted, they work really hard, despite all of those things in their favor, because there's so many different variables to be considering, they completely miss this. And that, again, that is not their fault at all. Like I made this same mistake for years and years. It is simply because I finally understood this formula and I got so fed up with getting screwed over by my ads, not really by my ads, but by myself, not understanding that I needed to look elsewhere, that I finally cracked this code of this formula that allows me to look at everything from a 10,000 foot view and then quickly hone in on where the issue is. That allows me to put the ad account completely to the side, put the average order value completely to the side, and just hone in on the conversion rate. And then if it's the conversion rate, look at the add to cart rate, initiate checkout, and the actual conversion rate, and then hone in there again. And so the reason I want to make this video is that this is the same strategy I look at using every time I'm in a student's account. Every single time I run through the same formula in my head over and over again in my own stores. Every time I look at our sites, very first thing I do is run through this formula in my head and just start checking off the boxes of like which variable is impacting performance the most. It's like the Hormozy term of the law of constraints. What is the constraint in the business right now? And this formula, specifically for Shopify sellers, helps us hone in on that and, really spend our time where it's best spent. Last thing I'll say is that if you can take away nothing from this video besides what I'm about to say, it is take away the fact that you will end up spending so much more time trying to chop down the tree by just running at it and just chopping it down with whatever tool you got in your hand. You're going to waste so much time. It's going to feel good because you're going to be busy. You're going to be active. It's going to feel like you're doing the whole entrepreneurship thing. I was the same way for years. But really what you want to do is take a beat. When things aren't working, evaluate that, identify it, then take a step back, sharpen the axe by using this formula to then identify where you should be placing your focus, sharpen the axe, and then with this renewed focus and clarity, you'll see that the other side of the tree actually has a weak spot. And the quickest way to fell the tree was not continuing to mash your dull axe against the strongest side of the tree. It was sharpen the axe, go around the other side, hit it in the weak spot, and you get the end result you wanted a lot faster and a lot easier. Sometimes it just takes taking a step back and correctly analyzing. And if you want to learn more about this kind of stuff, please be sure to like and comment down below so that I know to make more longer form videos like these that are a little bit more down in the weeds. And if you like this stuff, I personally enjoy talking about it a lot more. So I'd be more than happy to do it. And as always, the free school group is there for you guys, 21-hour course as well. And I want to thank you for watching this far, and I'll talk to you soon.